Did you know a diving accident once killed 4 men so fast, their bodies told the whole story before anyone could cover it up? November 5th, 1983. The Byford Dolphin oil rig, North Sea. 4 divers were finishing a saturation dive, living inside pressurized chambers for days at a time so their bodies could adjust to the deep. A dive tender opened a pressurized clamp connecting 2 chambers before they were equalized. The pressure inside was 9 times higher than normal surface pressure. The seal blew in an instant. The decompression was so violent, so instantaneous, that the human body simply could not survive it. Not in the way you imagine dying. Faster, more total. 4 divers and 1 tender were killed immediately. Investigators documented everything: the mechanical failure, the procedural breakdown, the sequence of decisions that led to that moment. The company was fined the equivalent of around $900 per life. No criminal charges. No executives held responsible. The physics of what happened to those men became a textbook case. The cost of letting it happen stayed buried in a quarterly report. Did you know that killing one of history's most dangerous men may have cost an entire village its existence? Reinhard Heydrich ran the machinery of the Holocaust. He organized the final solution. Even Hitler's inner circle was afraid of him. In May 1942, 2 Czech paratroopers trained by British Special Forces ambushed his car on a curved road in occupied Prague. They had 1 shot at this. Heydrich died from his wounds 9 days later. The mission was a success. Hitler's response was total. Within weeks, German forces surrounded the Czech village of Lidis. Every man and boy over 15 was shot. The women were sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. 82 children were taken away and gassed. The buildings were burned, the rubble cleared, and the village was literally erased from maps. Lidis had nothing to do with the assassination. The 2 paratroopers knew reprisals would come. Their handlers in London knew it too. They did it anyway. The mission succeeded. The village vanished. And the question of who carries that weight never fully goes away. Did you know an entire Royal Navy expedition vanished in the Arctic, and the thing that killed them was their own food? In 1845, 129 men set sail to chart the Northwest Passage. The ships were loaded with everything they could possibly need. Canned food for 3 years. Modern equipment. Experienced crew. They never came back. For over a century, no one knew exactly what went wrong. Then forensic scientists examined the recovered bones and hair of the crew members. What they found was disturbing. Lead. Massive amounts of it, running through every tissue sample. The tin cans had been sealed with improperly applied lead solder. As the men ate, the poison built up slowly in their bodies. Their thinking clouded. Paranoia set in. Judgment collapsed. The worst part is that the men had no idea. They were making decisions, real-life or death decisions, with brains that were quietly being destroyed. They grew erratic, then desperate. Then they were gone. 129 men, poisoned by the supplies meant to save. Did you know the US government once used an American city as a test subject for a biological weapon? In September 1950, a Navy ship quietly sailed along the coast of San Francisco. For 6 days, it sprayed a fine mist of bacteria into the air. The bacteria were called Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigi. The operation was called Sea Spray. Nobody on shore was told. The Navy wanted to see how a biological attack would spread across a major city. San Francisco was the experiment. Its residents were the data. Within weeks, people fell ill with unusual infections. At least 1 man died. His name was Edward Nevin. He was a retired pipe fitter who had been recovering from surgery. The bacteria entered his bloodstream. He never left the hospital. His family sued the government. They won nothing. A federal court ruled the government could not be held liable. National security. There was no cover-up that unraveled. No one was fired. No one apologized. The court simply looked at what happened and decided it was allowed. Did you know an entire nuclear disaster was erased from Soviet maps for 30 years? In September 1957, a cooling system failed at the Mayak nuclear facility deep in the Ural Mountains of Russia. A storage tank holding radioactive waste exploded with the force of a small nuclear bomb. The blast contaminated over 20,000 square miles of land. Tens of thousands of people were evacuated. Villages were bulldozed. Livestock were shot. Crops were burned. And then the Soviet government did something almost more disturbing than the explosion itself. They made it disappear. Towns were removed from official maps. Doctors were ordered to record deaths as other causes. The entire contaminated region was given a name that appeared nowhere in any public document. Scientists who tried to publish findings were silenced or imprisoned. People were dying and had no idea why. A biologist named Zoris Medvedev finally smuggled information to the West in the 1970s. Soviet officials called him mentally ill and had him committed. The disaster wasn't officially acknowledged until 1989. The cover-up outlasted the catastrophe by decades. Did you know the US government gave full immunity to war criminals in exchange for their research notes? Unit 731 was a secret Japanese military program operating in occupied China during World War II. Inside its walls, prisoners were frozen alive to study frostbite. Others were locked in pressure chambers until their eyes burst. Limbs were removed without anesthesia. Plague, cholera, and anthrax were tested directly on human beings. Thousands died, mostly Chinese civilians, Soviet prisoners, Allied POWs. When Japan surrendered in 1945, the unit's commander, Shiro Ishii, should have faced a war crimes tribunal. He never did. American officials made a quiet deal. Full immunity for everyone involved. No trials, no prison. In return, the US received every page of experimental data. The arrangement stayed classified for decades, and the data itself was folded into American biological weapons research throughout the Cold War. No one was charged. No one answered for it. The men who ran those experiments died free. The only thing that survived, officially, was the science. Did you know a half-blind yoga teacher almost started World War III? His name was Shoko Asahara. By the early 1990s, he had built something that had no right to exist inside a religious compound in rural Japan. Chemists, virologists, aerospace engineers, lawyers. Some of Japan's most educated people had joined his cult, Aum Shinrikyo, and they were not there to meditate. They were manufacturing sarin, VX nerve agent, botulinum toxin, all of it inside a place that looked like a spiritual retreat. Asahara told them the apocalypse was coming and that they were the chosen ones who would survive it. He didn't just ask for belief, he asked for expertise, and they gave it to him. The Tokyo subway attack in 1995 killed 13 people and sent thousands to hospitals, choking and convulsing on the platform floors. But here is what most people don't know. That attack was not the plan. It was rushed, improvised, launched specifically to distract police who were getting too close. The real plan was far worse, and they almost pulled it off. Did you know a 17-year-old girl fell 2 miles from a breaking plane and walked out of the Amazon alone? On Christmas Eve, 1971, Lanza Flight 508 was torn apart by lightning over Peru. The plane shredded midair. Julianne Koepke, still strapped to her seat, fell roughly 10,000 feet into the jungle below. She woke up on the forest floor, alone, one eye swollen shut, a broken collarbone, and the jungle pressing in from every direction. She had training most passengers didn't. Her parents were biologists. She knew moving water leads out. She knew to stay in the shallows. But nothing prepares you for what she walked past. Rows of seats still upright in the mud. Passengers still buckled in. She recognized some of them. She kept moving. For 11 days, she waded through rivers, ignored the maggots burrowing into her arm wound, and followed the current until she found people. She was the only survivor out of 92, and for the rest of her life, that number never left her. Did you know a baker from Anchorage spent over a decade hunting women through the Alaskan wilderness, and the FBI had no idea? Robert Hansen looked like nobody. He ran a bakery. He was quiet, polite, well-liked. He won awards for his hunting. That last part mattered. For years, Hansen would abduct women, load them onto his private plane, and fly them deep into the Alaskan bush, miles from anything, miles from anyone. Then he gave them a head start, and he hunted them. Alaska worked in his favor. The state is bigger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Bodies disappear there. People disappear there. For over a decade, no one connected the dots. The break came from a single woman who escaped mid-abduction and ran to the police. When the FBI finally sat down with Hansen, he was calm, cooperative, almost. He confessed to 17 murders the way someone might describe a fishing trip. Soft voice, no emotion, just details. The wilderness hid his secrets for years. In the end, one woman's survival buried him. Did you know one man accidentally saved the world and was punished for it? September 26, 1983, a Soviet bunker outside Moscow. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov is alone at his post, running on no sleep, staring at a screen that just lit up red. 5 nuclear missiles, incoming, from the United States. He had 4 minutes. Protocol said report it immediately. That would trigger a Soviet counterstrike. Hundreds of millions of people dead before sunrise. But something felt wrong. 5 missiles, only 5. Petrov knew a real American first strike would launch thousands, not 5. No enemy gives you a warning shot with nuclear weapons, so he waited. He called it a system error. He was right. A satellite had mistaken sunlight reflecting off clouds for missile launches. The world never knew how close it came that night. And Petrov? He wasn't celebrated. He wasn't promoted. He was quietly reprimanded for failing to fill out his logbook correctly during the incident. He spent the rest of his life in a small apartment outside Moscow, largely forgotten. One tired man. One instinct. 8 billion. Did you know one man survived both atomic bombs dropped on Japan? His name was Tsutomu Yamaguchi. On August 6, 1945, he was in Hiroshima on a business trip when the first bomb fell. The blast burned his skin, burst both his eardrums, and left him barely standing. But he was alive, so he went home. His home was Nagasaki. 3 days later, he sat in his supervisor's office trying to explain what he had seen. He said that one single bomb had destroyed an entire city. His supervisor thought he was crazy. Then the window went white. The second bomb hit while the words were still in the air. Yamaguchi survived that one too. But surviving the unsurvivable twice doesn't leave a person unchanged. He had nightmares for decades. He developed radiation sickness. He lost his wife to cancer caused by her own exposure. He carried the weight of 2 separate impossible days for the rest of his life. He lived to 93, and until the very end, he kept telling the world what he saw. Did you know a dying man once turned his own death into a weapon? Alexander Litvinenko was a Russian spy who knew too much. In November 2006, he met 2 men at a London sushi restaurant. By the next morning, he was in the hospital, and he was never leaving. The poison was polonium-210, a radioactive substance so rare, only a handful of places on Earth can even produce it. It destroys the body from the inside out, slowly, over 23 days. As he lay dying, his hair falling out, his organs shutting down, Litvinenko did something extraordinary. He gave formal statements from his hospital bed, on camera, identifying Putin's government as responsible. He knew he was already gone, so he made his death mean something. Meanwhile, investigators followed the trail of radiation across London. Hotel rooms, airplane seats, a Premier League football stadium. Everywhere his killers had walked, the polonium had followed. The men who poisoned him flew home to Russia. They were never extradited. Litvinenko died on November 23, 2006. His final statement was read aloud at a public inquiry 9 years later. He had planned it that way. Did you know a single sniper once crawled over 2,000 yards through enemy jungle, alone, over 4 days, just to take one shot? His name was Carlos Hathcock. The year was 1969. His target was a North Vietnamese general, deep inside enemy territory. No backup, no food, barely any movement at all. He crawled inches at a time, for 4 straight days, through jungle that the enemy controlled entirely. At one point, a Viet Cong soldier walked directly toward him. Hathcock had to kill the man silently, mid-crawl, without making a sound, without moving, and without breaking his cover. Then he kept going. He reached his position. He took the shot. The general was dead. Then he turned around and crawled back out. 4 more days. The Viet Cong put a $30,000 bounty on his head. That was 30 times higher than the price on any other sniper in the war. What nobody could explain was the part that happened before the trigger, the part where he did the math, alone in that jungle, and decided to keep moving anyway. Did you know a single chunk of plutonium killed 2 scientists in 2 separate accidents, and the men who built the atomic bomb named it the Demon Core? Los Alamos, 1946. Physicist Louis Slotin was showing a group of colleagues how close you could push a nuclear reaction without triggering a chain reaction. He called it tickling the dragon's tail. The tool keeping catastrophe at bay was a screwdriver. Then it slipped. The core went critical. A burst of blue light filled the room. Slotin grabbed the assembly apart with his bare hands, stopping the reaction in seconds. He saved everyone in the room. He knew immediately what he had done to himself. So did they. He absorbed a lethal dose of radiation in under a second. Doctors estimated it was the equivalent of standing 1,400 meters from an atomic blast. For the next 9 days, Slotin described everything. His vision blurring, his hands blistering, his organs failing one by one. He died on May 30th, 1946. The Demon Core was never used again. Did you know the Soviet Army once dedicated artillery strikes, counter-sniper teams, and entire infantry units to hunting a single farmer? His name was Simo Häyhä, a Finnish farmer. No military academy, no formal training. Just a man who had spent his whole life hunting in the forests of Finland. When the Soviet Union invaded in 1939, Häyhä walked into the snow and disappeared. He wore all white. He packed snow into his mouth so his breath wouldn't fog in the air. He lay completely still for hours in temperatures of negative 40 degrees Celsius, and he killed over 500 Soviet soldiers in roughly 100 days, not with a scope, iron sights only. Because a scope means raising your head higher, Heha never raised his head higher than he had to. The Soviets started calling the forest the White Death. Soldiers refused to move in the open. A single tree line became a psychological prison. They eventually found him, hit him in the jaw with an explosive bullet. Half his face was gone. He woke up from the coma the day the war ended. He lived to 96.